Do you have the phones? We're going live. We're live. We are live. Not sponsored by Zevia. Okay. Can you get stronger? Gosh, I hate when I lose a pen. Can you get stronger without getting bigger? Can you get stronger without getting bigger is like the absolute biggest question. Actually, I was just texting with one of our athletes. We had an athlete who got this is like I can't even make this up. 7 All-Americans, 7, not 1, not 2, 7 All-Americans, All-American, I guess trophies, plaques, however you want to call it. This past indoor season for swimming, and that's like the biggest question: is it possible to build strength without building size? Like, what types of athletes can benefit from building strength without building size, right? And so if we're looking at that specific issue, you can set up those cameras still if you want, Andrew. I don't know where, oh, my phone's over there. And so if you're looking at the whole goal or whole purpose with an athlete that is trying to build strength, not gain size, typically these athletes are going to be in a sport where there is a high priority or a high focus on relative strength. Okay, so if we're looking at relative strength, we immediately can start to think about wrestling, combat sports, MMA. You know, you're in a weight class, Olympic weightlifting, okay, powerlifting. You're in a weight class, but then also you have to look at sports like high jump, sprinting, sports where you need to get more explosive, you need to get faster, and if you have excess mass, it will have a negative impact on your performance. Okay, so when we're looking at how to get stronger without getting bigger, the athlete's dialed in, and think about like a swimmer. A swimmer needs to apply a massive amount of force so their velocity can be high, because force and velocity don't have an inverse relationship. So if we're going to apply a large amount of force to get, let's say if we get stronger, okay, and we weigh 150 pounds and we just keep getting stronger and more explosive and more coordinated, the force production goes up, but because our body weight maintains the same load, we move faster. Our pace improves. Okay, so that's like even a distance runner will benefit from getting stronger without gaining weight, right? So that's where the relative strength comes into play. That's where looking at body weight classes comes into play. And so is it possible to gain strength or coordination, without gaining size? Okay, and first we've got to look at if we're going to be gaining size, what's that size going to be? The size of that. Yeah, is anybody here from Discord? AR Official is here. Are you here from Discord? Can you actually build strength without building mass? 12% of you said no. 12%. Okay, so that's a trigger moment for me. If you think that we can't, think about this, okay? First, let's go into what kind of size can we gain. There's basically, we can either gain fat mass, okay? So we have fat mass, which will occur if we're eating an excess calorie. If we're in a caloric surplus, we could gain muscle mass, but we could also at the same time gain fat mass. And now all of a sudden we have a large amount of adipose tissue. And so that's like the interesting part, is that a lot of people will be like, oh, well, when I lift, I get big. Well, no, what happens is when you lift, your appetite goes up and you don't control your eating. So you're gaining a large amount of muscle mass. And because you're hungry from resistance-based training, you're actually eating in excess of what you're burning. And then you also do get a little heavier from fat mass. That's called the old bulk. We're bulking. Now, we could see a gain in mass from bone density, and we can see a gain in mass from actual myo increase, increase in your muscle mass. Okay. So if we see an increase in muscle mass, that could be happening from sarcoplasmic hypertrophy, where you're just expanding the sarcoplasm inside the muscle cell, and it expands, it gets really big. And then myofibrillar hypertrophy comes in and builds more myofibers inside of that cell. So there's essentially, the simplest way to look at it is 3 types of mass gains. Okay. Now the aspects around strength then is we're looking at how do we have these strength adaptations. In novice athletes, you will see in the first 8 to 12 weeks a massive improvement in strength, okay? And that typically is happening solely from improving coordination, meaning their body goes from like bench pressing like this and squatting, falling all over the place, to all of a sudden they're more coordinated, they're more stable, and they can hit better patterns, and now all of a sudden they can produce more force. They have more strength, but they haven't had that much of a muscle mass gain yet. They've just improved their neural imprint, their neural coordination. So typically what happens as strength gains is that in most, I would say 99% of the research, or 99% of even the professors out there that will talk about this, they'll say strength adaptations can occur metabolically. They can occur from mechanical tension. You can see metabolic stress, mechanical load, but they oftentimes will forget that we can see strength gains from neural adaptations well past the novice point. Okay. So if we're looking at, using a world-class weightlifter, for example, I'll use Haley in this case for an example. If Haley had to stay inside of a weight class of 49 kilos, but her total just kept going up and going up and going up. And what was happening is she was losing fat mass and she was gaining some muscle mass. That was happening for sure. That happened. But she was also improving her technique, improving her neural stability, which in turn helped her muscles coordinate more effectively. Okay, it's the same way that high jumpers might maintain the same fat mass year over year. Barshim has maintained this same body fat percentage for essentially 6 or 7 years, but he's PR'd because he's gotten more dialed in with his technique. He's had better neurological imprint. He's had better neurological coordination. He's had better technical execution because he's become more coordinated. So if we want to build strength, we need to focus on those aspects of how to improve the neural coordination while dialing in our nutrition as well as possible. So that's like the other factors that a lot of people will say, well, I want to back off of lifting weights because I get big and bulky. Well, actually, you just don't focus on your nutrition when you start to lift weights. So that means we've got to know what are your macros currently. How much protein, how much fat, how much carbohydrates, are you drinking at all? What's your sleep like? And then all of a sudden we track all this stuff. We see what their sleep's like and we realize they're in a 500 calorie surplus, and that's why they're getting big and bulky. It doesn't have anything to do with the lifting. It has to do with the fact that nutrition needs to be brought into place. So, when you go and you look at that, so if you start to think about, okay, so what's the methodology? If I need to get stronger within this body weight range, okay, and I'm taking care of all my nutrition, how can I improve that neurological aspect? Well, first of all, you want to use exercises that will focus on acceleration, okay? And that's where something like technical coordination movements, like doing a snatch or doing a clean, will drastically improve your overall force, okay? So that's why weightlifters have a large vertical jump, okay? I love when people tell me that weightlifting doesn't have a big impact on vertical jumps, and then at the same time, we test everybody's vertical jump and all of their vertical jumps are higher. And then we also go in and everybody's like, oh, well, it just so happens. That's why they're weightlifters, because they have high vertical jumps. Okay, my throwers then too. Okay, my football players. You get more explosive using movements that are faster and focus on acceleration. Okay, so you execute a clean. That's accelerative. A snatch, a muscle snatch, behind the neck jerk, a power snatch, a two box snatch, a high hang snatch. You use these movements to get faster, to get to learn how to apply force for global coordination. You learn how to do this at high speeds on a regular basis. Then you use rep ranges like 2 to 5 reps for 6 or 7 sets. You will get really, really freaking strong using those rep ranges. And then you bring in something like plyometrics. Okay. How do jumpers stay very strong? Tora Harris was a 7'7", 7'8" high jumper. He could power clean 140 kilos. Jonathan Edwards has the world record in the triple jump, and he could power clean 145 kilos at a body mass of about 170 pounds. Okay, you can look up Thea Lafon Gadsden. Okay, she just won the indoor world championships in the triple jump. She's extraordinarily strong with a power clean, with a high pull, with a back squat. She has a large amount of strength, and she's also incredibly lean because remember, she has to be really dialed in with her nutrition because she's in a sport where excess mass can have a negative impact on her performance. She just jumped over 15 meters in the triple jump, which is a top 10 triple jump of all time. But because she does accelerative lifts like a clean or like a pull, a hang pull or a power snatch, whatever you want to pick, she can express a large amount of force, and she's very, very strong from those movements. Now you can bring in partial range of motion movements, full range of motion movements. You can do squat jumps. You can do a lot of plyometrics. Okay. When plyometrics are used by somebody who needs to get stronger, okay, you can do explosive push-ups, explosive pull-ups. Guess what? Rope climbs are through a pattern of acceleration. There's a reason why rope climbs help people get so freaking strong in their lats, in their grip, in their biceps, because they're accelerating the entire time that they do a rope climb. Same thing with a rope pull. Okay, so all of these movements have a massive benefit for strength gains in general. And then what's interesting is that some people have even brought up, okay, well, they'll talk about, if you use Thea for an example. Now, I don't coach Thea. I'm friends with her, and her husband is a very, very good friend of mine. I'd argue top 2 jump coaches in the entire world. And if you look at Aaron and you talk to Aaron about it, it's like, do women, or I don't know what Aaron actually would say about this question, but I think his thought process in training is like, we need to keep her as lean as possible, and we need to keep her as strong as possible because that leads to more force, and good technique then leads to a longer jump. Now, should women train differently than men in regards to building strength without size? I think that there's like a fine line. I think that women should be aware, and I think a lot of distance runners struggle with this, okay? If you get 2 5,000 meter distance runners, a male and a female, so you have Josh Kerr and Beatrice Chabet, okay? So we've got 2 distance runners, right? They both need to be fast. They both need to have really good endurance. So they've got to be making sure that they're doing all their aerobic work, anaerobic threshold work, aerobic threshold work. Let's say they're both on the same system. They both have to be lean. Okay. They both have to have sub 15% body fat, something like this, so that they can win in these events. The thing that I think is different, I think they both should be doing plyometrics. They both should be doing some resistance-based training. The resistance-based training won't be as heavy, obviously, for a distance runner. I think plyometrics and I think back squat and then single leg squat will still have a positive impact on their performance. The difference between Beatrice Chabet and Josh Kerr is that I do think there should be a point where the coach needs to discuss with the woman, like, okay, we've got to be aware of your menstrual cycle. And if you get too lean and the volume is too high and you lose that cycle, how are we handling that? What is the discussion going to be? What's the response? Like, how do you feel? How do you feel about losing that cycle? What kind of sacrifices do you want to make? Do you like, that's a real question that a lot of people don't think about. So I think when you look at men versus women, men will break down earlier when they're when they're trying to be as lean as possible and gain a lot of strength. Women typically will lose that cycle at some point. Okay. Distance runners, endurance athletes will lose the cycle. Okay. At some point that will happen, and that has to be discussed. Okay. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not telling people like it's right or wrong. I'm telling people that needs to be a discussion point on where to go with training from that point. Does that mean that training should be different I think women can handle a little bit more volume than men. I think women can handle a little bit more volume in the weight room. And I think women respond very clearly, more powerfully to resistance-based training, meaning like a woman who single leg squats more or does single leg plyometric work more will see a better response in their 5K than probably someone like Josh Kerwood, who's already just a total, already very, very fast. Women don't have as much fast twitch fiber as men do. And I also think their neural coordination is not to speed where the men's coordination is, and that's where they can make up ground. That's that low-hanging fruit. So I think that, would you train differently? Not really, just maybe a little bit more volume. Okay, so I hope that clarifies things around that. And then I want to go into, there's 2 research papers that are really good on muscle density, no size, muscle hypertrophy, muscle strength. But I wanted to look at, Jeremy Uthier's got a video on how to build muscle without bulking from a couple years ago. It's like 5 years. So I wanted to look at that real quickly, but then get back into your questions. And we do have, our podcast, Garage Strength Podcast, when we go deep into all this stuff, we go very deep into this discussion on our Garage Strength Podcast. We'll talk about calisthenics. We'll talk about how calisthenics can have a positive impact on that relative strength. And so make sure that you guys subscribe to the Garage Strength Podcast. You check out our lives over, when we go live with our podcast, and you also check out over on Spotify. So let's get into the video reaction here. Let's just say,
if you want to build muscle, you go to bulk, right? I mean, that's what all the biggest guys in the gym seem to be doing. But bulking can actually be the wrong way to build muscle for many people. Today, I'll share why that is and how you can build muscle without bulking. Now, when I first started lifting, I took the advice, you ought to eat big to get big to heart. I kid you not, at one point, I was drinking almost a gallon of milk a day. But after that first bulk, I began to notice that bulking just didn't give me the results I hoped for. I would end up gaining way more fat compared to muscle, and I just couldn't figure out why. And this got me thinking, is overeating really the only way to build muscle? And simply want to maximize growth?
If you're starting at an already high body fat percentage, it's totally fine to go into a surplus and put on muscle. Just be aware that it's going to come with more body fat gain. So if you're already close to where you're comfortable with the way you look, you might want to consider taking an approach where you're eating at maintenance, or you're trying to lean gain, or you might decide to cut first before then eventually bulking. And that doesn't mean it's better from any standpoint. It really just has to do what the individual is comfortable with and what their aesthetic goals might be.
But there is one group of people that highly benefit from bulking. They studied them back in 2002, took a group of beginners who just started lifting weights and gave them a 2,000 calorie.
John Garhammer right there. I just have to brag a little. John's done a podcast with us, and he's actually from my hometown. He's come and trained at the gym. I just need to brag about that.
Their weight gainer on top of their usual diet. After 8 weeks, they all gained around 7 pounds. If you do the math, this means they were probably in a daily calorie surplus of around 400 to 500 calories. Now, of the 7 pounds they gained, almost all of it was lean mass, not fat.
So beginners just blow up from bulking. And that's probably, honestly, the problem with the bulk is that the success you have from the bulk, like let's say, I'm just thinking about myself. I got into bulking from freshman year to 10th grade. I gained like 65 pounds, dude. And I got freaking unbelievably strong. Not that fat. But the more I did it, the
we're going to show you how to get strong without getting big, and we're going to start right now. So if we're trying to get strong,
so if we get in here,
you can use today to improve your want to focus on is lighting up that. It's going to improve our coordination. And this is the first movement, so it's going to help us.
Okay, so improve that coordination is a big one.
Okay, so we're going in.
That's annoying. Okay, so the big thing there is like we've got to focus on improving coordination. We've got to focus on enhancing the individual's ability to have that neural coordination and to also be under mechanical tension. Okay, if they're under mechanical tension, now their body has to recruit more motor units. I believe there is also some discussion or communication in the body where it's like, okay, we got to recruit more satellite cells. The satellite cells can then come and repair those damaged areas, and that in turn will lead to an improvement in strength. Now, if we're looking at this from a research perspective, the two papers that I have chosen here are going to be muscle density. Well, let's go over. There we go. I couldn't see that. Nope. Right here. Okay. Muscle density, but not size. Okay. So let's share this. You see this, guys? This is from 2020. And the big aspect here, it's a cross-sectional study. What are their methods? They take the hand grip test, okay, and then the timed up and go test. They're looking at the computed tomography. So they're trying to really go through and measure it that way. And then in men and women, associations of muscle area with that was the time to get up and go test, okay, were insignificant after adjustment for age, height, and weight. Associations with the HGS, which is the hand grip strength, were only significant in men for the glute max and mid thigh, but slopes were rather low. Associations between muscle density were pronounced, in particular for HGS. Okay, so muscle density, conclusion, muscle density is more strongly associated with muscle strength than muscle size. And in women, muscle density was also more strongly associated than muscle size with physical performance. Okay, so muscle density may represent a more clinically meaningful surrogate of muscle performance than just actual size. Okay, so muscle density measurements, and I think muscle density to me would be like myofibrillar hypertrophy style. Muscle density measurements of trunk and glute muscles can be easily obtained from a routine CT scan and may become an important way to screen and diagnose for sarcopenia. So there are examples from this that there's individuals that will have a more dense muscle, but not necessarily a larger muscle. And I think that's where the type of hypertrophy that we would be looking at comes into play. And that's where it's like, okay, let's look at hypertrophy from the aspect of, myofibrillar hypertrophy versus sarcoplasmic hypertrophy. I actually just we did a little analysis of this morning. This is the 100-gram protein study. Now, let's get into this next one, muscle hypertrophy and muscle strength, dependent or independent variables. So is muscular strength dependent upon hypertrophy? This is a provocative review. What a name, a provocative review. Okay, so if we're looking at this and just go into the abstract before I get into answering your guys' question, is that what does this research say about do you have to have muscle size for muscle strength based off this review? The question whether the muscle hypertrophy induced by resistance training, hormone administration, or genetic manipulation is accompanied by a proportional increase in muscle strength is still open. This is so crazy that like a lot of people think this is a pretty simple answer, but it still is pretty complex. The review summarizes and analyzes data obtained in human and rodent models that have monitored in parallel changes in muscle size and changes in muscle force, okay, measured in isometric contractions in vivo and isolated muscles ex vivo in rodents and in single muscle fibers. Although a general positive relation exists among the two variables, positive relationship between size and strength, a number of studies showed a clear disassociation with increase of muscle size with no change or even decrease in strength, and vice versa. Increase in strength without increase in size. Okay, so it is possible to increase strength without increasing size. It has even been shown to occur, although it almost always is positive. If you increase size, you will increase strength. The possible mechanisms of such disassociation involves neural motor control. Okay, neural motor control. So what do we talk about? Plyometrics, accelerative lifts, so doing technical coordination movements, okay, doing rope climbs, okay, jumps, and or cellular and molecular adaptations of muscle fibers, okay? So that's the big aspect here, is muscle hypertrophy needed for muscle strength? No. Is it beneficial for muscle strength? Yes. Are there examples where you can get stronger without gaining muscular hypertrophy? Yes. How can you do that? By increasing neural motor control, as seen right here. By increasing neural motor control, that's one of the biggest areas that you can see an improvement in overall muscular strength. So thought that would be a good one to share for everybody to just check that out and be like, oh, okay, so it is possible. It definitely is possible. Now, in so doing, when we are actually focusing on this, we have to know and understand and have the right types of periodization, the right type of focus. And of course, we also have to be very, very dialed in to our overall nutrition and recovery. I think that's like another big aspect, is that we need to make sure our nutrition's on point. We need to make sure we're sleeping quite a bit. We need to make sure that we're doing a good job. We need to make sure that we're doing a really good job as far as protein consumption is concerned as well. Okay, so let's get into some of these questions. So, Coach, good morning. Coming from boxing training, an update from a past stream, but I got out of third shift. Athleticism has increased a lot. Thanks for saying get out of that schedule quickly. That's for Justin. That's good, Justin. I'm glad to hear that's working. I hope you continue to make some big-time gains and get healthy so you can keep smashing. Tyler Zellers. Do you consider Franz Bosch lifts as accelerative lifts, or is that more of a coordination training of extremity velocity? So that's a good question, because I think if you're looking at, and this is for BG, we will do more calisthenic content, and I think the calisthenic stuff is a big aspect. I think plyometrics in general. Franz Bosch lifts. So I'm thinking about like reflexive movements. And if I think about reflexive movements, there's like a little bit of two arguments. So if you're doing reflexive movements and you're trying to be fast, there is an acceleration, but even doing like a dumbbell power snatch, like a dumbbell snatch, actually the next question, can I do power snatches if they don't allow me to throw the barbell to the ground on my gym? For sure. I think doing like a dumbbell snatch to a hip lock, like technically you're not accelerating the entire way through, but because you're changing and you're reflexive through different joint angles and you're moving three-dimensionally, I think the argument that it would be acceleration focus is fair. It's going to improve your coordination no matter what. So that's another thing there, is like we just talked about the neural motor network essentially. And it's like if you do reflexive movements, plyometrics, you lift pretty heavy, you lift really fast and light, and you do sprints, and you're focusing on your nutrition, you're going to get stronger without really gaining much muscle mass. So basically, this is from Soul Soil. So basically, getting stronger without getting bigger is mostly done by getting your body and muscles more accustomed with the movement or with doing a similar movement. Yes, along with nutrition. Yes, for sure. Ethan's mentioning he's a sprinter, but he can't do Olympic lifts. I'm still learning, but is there any other lifts that I can do to get the same results? I think the only way you get the same results is by doing those movement patterns. I'd ask Ethan, why can't you do them? Can you do variations like a snatch high pull? Can you back squat, single leg squat, jumps? Can you do plyometrics? I would say there's things that you can do that aren't Olympic lifts, but they might not be the same results, but you can still get positive results from your overall programming. Do you have advice on training muscle memory, especially the GAA football kick? How do you most optimally get more accurate, better technique? You know what's interesting is that there's a whole study, there's a whole paper on Muay Thai training, and athletes that had a bigger back squat in Muay Thai training actually had a better knockout kick, which I think is awesome. And I think that if I'm looking at training in general for kicking as let's say a soccer player or a football player, I would immediately go in on, okay, if I'm trying to kick better, kick longer, kick further, I will immediately go all in on improving that back squat. What I wanted to show you guys here is I was going to do like a quick, I was thinking if you guys want me to, I could put together like a real quick one like we did last week of let's just say like a week layout of training for someone who's trying to increase their strength without increasing mass. Let me know what you think about that. I'm trying to move this over here while doing that. Oh, why is this so weird? There we go. Let's move this out. Okay. Can anyone else hear what's being said? I can't hear any audio except the commercial portion. I hope you could hear that. I'd rather get bigger and stronger. I think the big thing is like getting bigger is there's always a point of diminishing returns, right? Like there's always a point where it's like, all right, that's enough. I don't need to get bigger. And I think that what we lack in the realm of sports performance is like, okay, if I said to, we did a whole bunch of tests with some 8th grade football guys on Monday, right? And we said, okay, our D tackle, he's 265. Where should he get to? All right, so he should get to 315, but he shouldn't get to 315 now. If he's 265, 270 right now, let's just gain like 5 to 10 pounds a year. So that in 6 years, when he's a freshman, now we're looking at like he's probably 300 to 305. But if he's slowly gaining it, so if we have a timeline and we understand the point of diminishing returns relative to the sport the athlete's playing, now that mass gain is effective. And they're also more bought into nutrition and recovery. So if we're looking at a swimmer, right, and the swimmer has to go from doing 5 dead hang pull-ups to doing 15 dead hang pull-ups, and we've got to get them to squat more and hang snatch more so they're faster off the blocks. We need to get them to do that, but we can't say, okay, let's do that in the next 2 months. It's going to take time, and it's the same thing with the body weight gain, and we never really define that. We never are saying like, all right, you've got to get bigger, but what's the time period, and where's the point of diminishing returns? For a D tackle, it might be 315 at 6 feet. Okay, so that diminishing return is established. For a shot putter, it might be 330. Okay, well, that's established, and then you can work backwards. Ethan just said he does plyos and squats. Oh, wait, that was from earlier. Tyler, better to clean heavy and fast or lighter and faster? Lighter reps under 0.25 seconds versus heavier under 0.5 seconds. How are you measuring that, Tyler? Are you using like a Tendo unit? Because I don't think that you would be. I would want to see like meters per second. And I think that what's interesting with this is as coaches, we've got to see, where is your, like this is like a common issue. It's like this, and this does remind me of the force velocity curve, which we're starting to like try to like chip away at. Okay. And I like to think about like, what do I dislike about the force velocity curve? What I dislike about it is that it's way too simple, and you can punch a hole in it right away. Force and velocity are not inverse. If I'm running fast, I will have more force than if I'm squatting heavy, which is considered the high force. So it's wrong. But you can still get decent training suggestions off of the test. Now, this still falls in line with this statement here, is that we will think cleaning heavy, that there's a difference in cleaning heavy versus cleaning light, okay? Or that cleaning heavy, so we're getting this question, should we clean heavy or clean lighter and faster? And what's interesting is that really what we have to look at with the individual is there's probably a point of diminishing returns for a clean. Think about a football player. They probably don't need to clean more than 380 to 400 pounds. If we can analyze how that heavy clean impacts their lighter clean, that will help us moving forward. So if we can see that when they get to a 380 pound clean and then they go clean 70% of that weight, they can move it at like 1.7 meters per second, right? But then we go back and we say, okay, now that same individual cleans 420 and 70% of that doesn't move any faster. It moves the same speed. All right, well, there's a point of diminishing returns. But now we understand the calculation of the heavy clean is, let's say their max, and then when they move 70%, they move it at 1.8 meters per second, 1.75 meters per second. Now we can also understand in season, can we squat enough to get this athlete to maintain a fast clean at 1.75 meters per second, because that's when they have their best vertical jump. And then you have all these ratios and equations that you can follow. The force velocity curve doesn't do any of that. It's just saying like, okay, well, this person can squat a lot, this person can run a lot, but when they squat, they're not that strong, and when this person runs, they're not that fast. Okay, well, that's different. That's load-based. That's not related to force. The force issue is more related to the fact that if you can't apply force quickly in a specific time, then your velocity might be lower if it's unloaded. So it all goes back to load. Dylan Sharp, boom, thanks for that super chat. Mitchell Hooper is an example of showing you don't need to be bigger to be stronger. He's 320 pounds when others in his era, Brian Shaw, Thor, they were 400 plus pounds. I 100% agree with that. And that's where I also think, from my understanding, BG, dude, we already talked about, we're going to do that. What do you have questions around with calisthenic content? Give me some questions. I'm looking at Mahi right now, and he's saying velocity is the real power. Moving lightweight fast is actually power. I mean, couldn't you say that about anything? Movement over time or work over time would be power. Like, this is another just bigger discussion. I want to get back to Sean's question, because Sean asked something about abs and core. And if I can pull up this paper real quickly, there's a paper that we just, I'm going to pull this up. While I talk about Mitchell Hooper, I think this is a great statement here, is that Mitchell Hooper is known for doing weightlifting movements. Okay, so if you guys can remember back to that discussion of what we talked about with neural coordination. Okay, so Hooper is doing some jumps, and he does, technical coordination movements like snatch cleans. Okay, so the interesting part with that is that he's literally doing exactly what we had mentioned, and he's 100 pounds lighter than these guys, and I just think that that's a really big factor that we've got to keep in mind. Okay, I want to bring this up for Sean. So Dylan, thanks for chiming in with that. Now I got this one up here. This one's for Sean. Okay, so Sean asked the question, what rep range should you train your abs and core in for speed and athleticism? Do I need to go to failure? I feel like sometimes I don't struggle enough. Now let's go into this one. Okay. The relationship between core stability and performance in Division I football players. If we can go through this real quickly, I didn't even plan on doing this. National NCAA football players, average height, their body weight, blah, blah, blah. Subjects were tested on 3 strength variables, 1 rep max on the bench, back squat, and power clean. They had 4 performance variables, counter movement jump, the 20, the 40, and the 10-yard shuttle. Okay, so basically they're doing like a version of the combine. Then core stability on back extension, trunk flexion, left and right bridge. Okay. Significant correlations were identified between total core strength in the 20-yard sprint, the 40-yard sprint, the shuttle run, okay, the power clean divided by their body weight, their 1 rep back squat, their bench press, and combined 1 rep max and body weight. Trunk flexion and 20-yard, 40-yard shuttle run, power clean, and all these other exercises. Positive correlation, okay? Look at that. The results of this study suggest that core stability is moderately related to strength and performance. Thus, increases in core strength are not going to contribute significantly to strength and power and should not be the focus of strength and conditioning. So to answer Sean's question, and if let's just go back to this. we've been talking for, now we're going on like, what, 4 years about dynamic trunk control. And I've talked about that for catching a clean. I've talked about that with doing plyometrics. I've talked about dynamic trunk control and hitting the brakes. I've talked about that with holding the plate overhead. I've talked about dynamic trunk control with cutting and then releasing a plate. I've talked about it with doing a single leg squat. We will see, based off of this paper, speed work, full compound movements like a power clean, back squat. Those movements create greater core stability and greater performance for the athlete than doing direct core work. Essentially, doing direct core work, unless you're injured, is virtually worthless. Like literally virtually worthless. I don't think it's entirely worthless. I think doing like some ab roller, doing some V-ups, doing some hollow body rocks as accessory work. Let's say you're inside peak strength. You might get that for 3 sets of 25. I think that stuff's good. Okay. And it's about 0.5% of the program. Okay. But spending and periodizing your training sessions off of direct core work is worthless, because people will say this is ab day. Based off of this here, this paper, go ahead and look this up. Okay. 2008. We can see that you will have better performances by doing these complex movements, and your core strength and stability will probably be greater from just doing them than to do direct core work. Now, I do think there's a point in doing some contrast style work where you're doing a front squat with direct core work. I do think that can be beneficial to a point. Let me know what you guys think about that. What do you think of bodybuilding for athletes, and how could one balance them in a weekly schedule? Bodybuilding for athletes, I think it really, for me, comes down to what are the biggest areas. So, we've talked about this quite a bit recently, where we're talking about impulse training, strength training, speed training, endurance training. Okay, so we got these 4 things. If I look at strength, the big component of strength work is going to be bodybuilding. Okay. So if I'm looking at an individual and I'm breaking down their performances, and I have tests assigned to those 4 areas, impulse, speed, endurance, strength, and I notice they have a huge glaring issue in their strength, now I can say, all right, they've got a big problem. We're further out from a season. Let's get all in on the bodybuilding for 8 to 10 weeks. And I think that's where athletes are going to see a lot of positive improvements. LOL BG, you are just driving me nuts with this calisthenic content, please. Yes, we will do more calisthenic content. Yes, I want to know, what do you want us to do? What videos? And I think calisthenic work, pull-ups, rope climbs, sprints, jumps, unilateral work, all fantastic. I was going to say bodybuilding we have a bodybuilding for athletes, 5 tips to improve sports performance. We do have that video. I'm going to pause this right here, that I'm going to share with you guys. So you guys could check that out here. And if you like that, maybe we could go do another one. Give this man his calisthenics. Give it to him. Soul Soil. I would like to use heavy weights, Olympic weights. Just think, in my current position where I can't even lift heavy, the weights, it's not worth buying a gym membership or a barbell for 300 plus is worth it. Soul Soil, I'm not sure what you're asking me there. Just use lighter weight to work on your technique and improve that for sure. Cormac, bodybuilding isn't for athletes, dude. It's another sport. Okay, so let's just clarify. When I'm referring to bodybuilding, I would say like more hypertrophic focused strength work. Okay, that's what I would be focusing on. LOL BG, do you have any questions around calisthenic movements? Do you have any thoughts? Not just restating that question. Best workout cycle for me, I'm in the gym for 6 days a week. Okay, so if we're in the gym for 6 days a week, Let's see which one. How's this look here? Let's see if I can zoom this out a little, if that improves. No. If I go there. I'm just asking those questions, LOLBG. Okay, so if we did a 6-day split, right? Okay, if I did a 6-day split, this is how I would set it up. Maybe what I'll do is I'll go like this, so it stays on screen. Okay, day 1 would be leg power. Day 2 would be upper power. Whoops. Okay. And this would be how we set up that split. Day 3, I would do one of two things. I would either do dynamic legs. So I would call this, like, this could be the impulse day. This then would be upper hypertrophy. Then day 5, day 6. Okay, so this would be, I would use this more as like upper, hyper, and weakness, like targeting weaknesses. Okay, so it's not like a hard day. Then I would do athlete day here. And then here I would do like upper slaughterfest. Okay, that's how I would lay out that. So you basically do 2 big leg days, 1 and 3. And now what you could do is you could move day 4 and day 3. You could sort of like interchange them. You could see how you feel. If you move day 3 to day 4 and day 4 to day 3, you can just see how you feel on that. And the problem is then day 4 is close to that athlete day. So you really just got to be aware of that. And that's where it comes into like the coaching aspect. Is shrimp or pistol squat better for wrestling? I honestly, I probably would prefer a pistol squat, to be totally honest with you. And maybe that's it, like top 5, top 7 calisthenics. I would say I would go with like a jump lunge, a pistol squat, a skater squat, clap push-up, a handstand push-up, pull-ups, rope climb. What is that, like 9? The study makes sense for core stability, but it measures running in a straight line. No, it had a 5-10-5, Sean. Sean, that had, I might have gotten out of that. Sean, that they measured the 5-10-5. That was not just a straight line. So that statement is not accurate, just to throw that out there. Not to get too aggressive here, but you're not counting in the fact that they did have a shuttle in there. And the shuttle had a massive improvement without the core work. Do you think core rotation work will be more worthwhile? Okay, I do think core rotational work, and I think more aggressive work. I think there's I do think that there's points to that stuff. If you're doing like a side medicine ball throw or like a almost like a jump in crow hop, I think there's worthwhile, or even like a seated overhead throw, like a V-up throw. Yes, for sure. There's benefits to that. Mahi states, getting strong in big lifts, then velocity-based lifting, which are still heavy, moving lighter weight fast. That's how I go about it. But we should never stop doing max effort sprints and jumps. Clear. We're in the clear. I agree. Agreed. For max strength training, would you accelerate the bar as fast as possible, or is that not important because you can build max strength without focus on explosive strength? That's a really, really good question. And I think that's like this this is a question of like, is moving heavyweight fast? And this is my favorite quote. I've got a book. R.A. Roman, who was a former weightlifting coach for the Soviet Union, would say there's a big difference between moving heavyweight and moving heavyweight fast. And I think that, Paul Quinn, and my belief as well, what's up, R2, is that moving with the intent, even if you've got a max effort bench, if your intent is to move it as fast as possible, I believe you will recruit better and you will achieve that lift more effectively. I'm gonna search on PubMed right now for anything around that. Effects of mindfulness, resistance training, heavy slow resistance versus this is eccentric, or this is treatment for Achilles. What can we search for? Resistance training, intent to move weight So if I remember correctly, there's, intent to move weight. Okay, so here's a velocity specific one. I guess I think to answer the question, I think that I'm trying to think through this. There is a movement velocity. I think when you're looking at this, I think you should be focusing on moving the weight as fast as possible, even when it's extraordinarily heavy. And I think that if you're not doing that, okay, if you're not moving that, and this goes back to the question of like, should you focus on moving weight fast or not? If you're not doing that, there could be a chance for a negative outcome. Like I don't think it'll help as much. Let me know if that's clear. Keese is asking if super training is worth buying. I think it is, but it's very, very dry, so I don't know if you really need to. It's really long as well. Now, here's a question. Can teenagers eat protein as a supplement? Let's just type in protein consumption. Okay, this is like my favorite thing. Controversy surrounding high. Here we go. Okay. So here we go. I'm going to put this up here. Can teenagers consume high protein supplements? Okay. So long-term consumption, we go into these discussions here. High protein meals and foods are thought to have a greater satiating effect. Protein intake also stimulates metabolic hormones that communicate information about energy status to the brain. Long-term ingestion of high amounts of protein seem to decrease food intake, decrease body weight, and body adiposity in many well-documented studies. The aim of this article is to provide an extensive overview of the efficacy of high protein consumption, weight loss, and maintenance, as well as potential consequences in human health. So the big thing here is there's literally like almost nothing on negative aspects of protein consumption. And to answer the question of can teenagers eat protein as a supplement, 100%. Jakob, hey Dane, I can do a snatch from the standing position, but I can't get low in the snatch start from the ground. I've taught myself to clean, but I feel limited in training due to my bad technique here. Jakob, can you do like 1 box clean or 2 box cleans or 2 box snatches, 1 box snatches? Earl asked the question, how is the intent to move fast and the velocity itself relative to the weight? Okay, so he's asking the intent to move fast relative to the actual velocity. So the intent to move fast versus the velocity of the weight. For instance, if a 1 rep max moving as fast as possible on one end and moving 85% as fast as possible on the other end. So let's think about this. Typically you'll see in like a back squat, like a failure will occur between 0.25 meters per second and 0.3 meters per second. Okay. Even with the intent, that's around where you're going to see failure. In most cases, fast would be like 0.75, like, or 0.5, you're going to be like, I was fast, 0.75 meters per second. Well, that was fast. You see a muscle snatch that is fast, you'll see it around like 2.9 meters per second. You see a power snatch that's fast, it's going to be like, 2.4 meters per second, or full snatch, 2 meters per second. So like the intent will arise in these measurements, and that's where you can start to see some of the unique, and that's actually some of the positive attributes around velocity-based training, as you get some decent feedback there. In MMA and in combat sports in general, I heard a lot about red, yellow, green days to optimize recovery. Yeah, you could do that. What are your thoughts on that? I think you could establish like those days that you don't want to go super heavy. And that just goes back to that periodization. And that's the big thing, like what we're doing inside Peak Strength. We set up the week so that the first 2 days you're going hard. Then the third day is more dynamic. Fourth day is very dynamic. Fifth day, it's just getting a pump, right? That's like the way we set up our training. So I think that's fair. Are leg extensions good for sprinters? It depends on what the sprinter's problem is. Likely not needed at all. Like, are they good? Sure. Is it needed? Are leg extensions needed? And again, this goes back to that point of diminishing returns. In sports performance, we have to identify where the point of diminishing returns is, how fast can we get there, and identify that as the goals to get to that point fast, right? And that's the thing with like leg extensions. Are they good? They're fine. Are they needed? Are certain lifts needed for certain sports? No. Does a sprinter need a leg extension? Probably not. Could it benefit them? Maybe. I think that's something that we've just got to bring up. Yeah. So let me know what you guys think about that one. I think there's a lot of different problems that I'm seeing, and I think that's some of the stuff we brought up in yesterday's YouTube video around endurance work. I wanted to bring up my complaints, my issues with that force velocity curve, mainly because I think it should be load velocity. And I think that if you just described it, instead of the force velocity curve, it should be like when this person is loaded, they do not perform as well as they do when they are unloaded. Or when this person is loaded, they perform better than they do when they are unloaded. Therefore, their velocity is lower. If we have the athlete who squats a lot but runs slowly, this athlete performs well on the load velocity curve on the load side, but they perform poorly on the velocity side where they are unloaded. So really it should be load and unloaded, and then velocity or force is in the middle. Because if the force velocity curve had some accuracy as far as what it's supposed to mean, riddle me this. If I'm running at full speed, I will exhibit 5 times ground reaction, 5 times body weight into the ground. I have never seen a study, and maybe I'm wrong, but I haven't seen a study that when you squat at maximum weight, let's say you take Usain Bolt, he squats maximum load, he would not exhibit 5 times his body weight at maximum load on his back squat. But you would see that in the sprint. So to me, it's not force velocity, it's load to velocity. Okay. And then you can figure out like this person's weak, this person's explosive. We need to change training this way, but it's just scratching the surface. Really what you need to do is dig deeper into their sport and be like, based off of their sport, based off of work to rest ratios, based off of how much speed or strength or impulse is needed, these are the tests that have to be done. It can't just be like a jump with weight, jump without weight, or whatever, however we're going about it. Dylan's coming in. Are there exercises, rep ranges a weightlifter should avoid when doing separate strength bodybuilding workouts? Don't want to negatively affect weightlifting. I think you've got to periodize those bodybuilding exercises pretty precisely. I wouldn't do rep ranges above like 4, maybe back squat up to rep ranges of 5. This is funny, LOLBG, that's good. I think avoid single leg squats. And I would set up, like you have a session where you're just doing snatch and clean and jerk. And then you have another session where you're doing the squat work, and then your squat work afterwards, you can do drop set work, and that's where you get your bodybuilding in. And then you can do some more technical work, snatch, clean and jerk, or whatever. And then you have like a push press session, and then you follow that up with some bodybuilding for your upper body. I would try to set it up that way, and then see throughout the week how you feel and where you can sort of alternate those different aspects. I hope that helps. Some movements like Miracle Grows can get weightlifters really sore, so we'll only usually do them on Fridays. We don't do them during the week unless we do them on like a Wednesday. Yes, Tyler, that's great. Ken Clark. I mean, Ken Clark has a paper in PubMed, and it's called "Whip from the Hip." Okay, that whip from the hip article really dials in what you're talking about there, around the hip. Okay, so I think that's the benefit of a single leg squat in the purest sense, is it's really dialing in around that hip girdle, and then using that coming off of that. So yeah, I agree with that. I don't know where the discussion there on negativity or disagreement would be. All right, I'm going to head down to training now. Time to go coach. Thanks for tuning in this week. Head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store.